Now, let's start in North America, where former United States President Donald Trump has been alleged to have committed fraud by repeatedly misrepresenting his wealth by hundreds of millions of dollars, a New York judge has ruled. The ruling, part of a civil case brought against the former president and his family business, said he defrauded banks and insurers for years. New York Attorney General Letitia James had accused Trump, his two adult sons, and the Trump Organization of inflating the value of their properties by more than $2 billion, which of course is an equivalent of £1.65 billion, to suit the needs of their business. Now, she claimed the defendants issued false records and financial statements to get better terms on loans and insurance deals and to pay less tax. Now, Trump and the other defendants have argued that they never committed fraud. Well, joining us now to have this conversation is Damola Adewale, a lawyer and global affairs analyst, all the way from New York. Thank you, Damola, for joining us on the news.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, Damola, speaking of the perception that this will have on the legal case going on, what impact would you say, or what is the international implication of the allegations and the legal proceedings against Donald Trump in his fraud case?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, this particular case is a civil case. It is not a criminal case, so there is no prosecution or any form of punishment for Donald Trump. It's a case involving financial misrepresentation, first of all, to the IRS, where Trump has been accused to devalue his assets so that he can pay lesser taxes, and then overinflate his assets to the insurance companies and loan companies so that he can have access to loans. So basically, this particular case was based on summary judgment, whereby the judge had to rule on whether Trump was liable for fraudulent practices or not. Regarding international expectation or reaction to this, Trump has always been regarded as a disruptor, especially since 2015, when he decided to run for presidency. And I think by now, the entire world knows who Trump is and his type of behavior and activities. So I don't think everybody is surprised about what is happening, especially as regarding the 4 other indictments he has in the state of Georgia and in Washington, D.C., and also in New York. So it's just like life as usual, basically.
Okay, Damola, still speaking of global perception and given your expertise in global affairs, can you analyze how this case will affect the standing of the United States on the world stage in terms of governance and the rule of law?
Yeah, the US has always been regarded as a country of accountability. Even though there's freedom of exercise of right, you can rely on the Constitution, on the First, Second, 14th Amendment to exercise any right you want. You are still, you still have this type of duty to act under the law. So if you commit any offense or any crime, you are still able to face the wrath of the law. And the difference between the US and any other country is that whatever you do, you're responsible and accountable for your actions, no matter how well connected you are or how high you are up there. When the system is ready to place discipline on you, they will do that. Basically, this particular incident about Trump has been on for years. Remember, Trump has been active since the 1970s, and he has been able to get away with a lot of things. So this is 2023, and then the law is catching up with him. So eventually, the law will catch up with you, no matter how connected you are.
Now, we're still trying to see how this case affects especially international relationships with the United States from different facets. International financial institutions and regulatory bodies are also closely monitoring the case. How do you think that this will influence the financial markets on the international stage or investment sentiment towards the United States?
Yeah, so the US, as I said earlier, is a country of accountability. So to a great extent, there's investors' confidence in the system. One way or the other, they're usually bad eggs like Donald Trump, but it doesn't affect the international perspective of how the US economic market is run. And also, if you look at it very well, the US is like one of the headquarters or the center for international finance. So it's as if you're trying to say the US will be observing itself. Because since the crime was committed in the US and any party including Donald Trump's sons, are already judged, then the system can get rid of the bad egg itself. So the international community, we continue to have that investors' confidence in the system in the US. I don't think they will have any form of bad reaction to it. The only time there can be a bad reaction is when there is global economic meltdown, or when the bank or the financial institution systems will collapse. In 2008 and maybe recently, you could see when there are the financial collapse, even in 1929. That is when you can see foreign investors in Europe, in the Asian countries, and also in the Middle East, when they will have this sort of or this type of reaction that they don't know whether, or fear or anxiety to invest in the US. But so far, so good. The US is actually doing itself very well by making sure that anybody that commits any crime or any financial crime within its territory will be put to the gallows, if I can mention that.
Okay, now some countries have faced similar high-profile corruption or fraud cases that involves political leaders. Are there any comparisons or contrasts with these cases in the global context?
Yes, a lot of comparisons. I would say US is in the middle. Let's start with a country like China. China is a country whereby they abhor corruption. Corruption is illegal, extremely, such that if you see any of their senior officials who are accused of corruption and there is a law, there are evidences of corruption against them, they can actually be put to death. You know, a country like China is very, very extreme in terms of corruption. I think North Korea, even though North Korea is regarded as a country whereby they are not really considered as, you know, part of the country with countries like that have this civil rights recognition. Then countries that are on the low par are like African countries that will have, you know, a lot of presidents in many African countries who have been accused of corruption and they continue to get away with it. And there is no system that can take upon them. The only activity that an African president or a leader can commit as a crime and that can have international repercussion will be crime against humanity. For example, what happened in Rwanda in 1994, the cleansing of the Hutus and the Tutsis. You can say that there is the trial in The Hague in Netherlands. That is when things like that can happen. But when it comes to corruption, many African countries, they actually harbor, they protect their leaders. The system has not been updated to try corrupt leaders. We have a lot in Nigeria as we speak. We have a lot in other African countries. And but the US, to look at it in context, even though there are like elites that commit some of these crimes, eventually the law will catch up on them. A perfect example was what happened in Georgia during the 2020 election, whereby 19 or 20 of Trump's associates have been indicted in Georgia, even though they are well connected. These are politicians, high net worth individuals, well connected individuals, and you can see that the law doesn't give a hoot about whether you are highly connected or not. Everybody is equal before the law in the US, and that's what's happening right now.
Okay, now finally and very quickly, as this case unfolds, it may, of course, intersect with international financial regulations and agreements. How would you, in your own professional opinion, advise the United States policymakers to address these potential international ramifications, especially to maintain diplomatic and economic relationships?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So going forward, I know that policymakers will make it mandatory for borrowers to not only declare their assets, but to also make sure that these assets are examined or observed by a third party. We have brokers or financial advisors or government regulators who will also conduct their own investigation as to the value of a particular asset. So this is one angle regarding where Trump overvalued his assets up to, as you said, over 2.2 billion and 1.7 billion in pounds. So going forward, an individual declaring its assets will not be sufficient anymore. There will be a third-party investigation and a verification as to whether the asset was adequately declared. On the other side, regarding IRS is a governmental body, it's a federal government body. So I know that IRS, whatever you do, tax avoidance is different from tax evasion. While tax avoidance may not be illegal, tax evasion is illegal. So if the IRS conduct their investigation and they found out that what happened was tax evasion, then going forward, IRS will always recommend that person to be charged to court for tax crimes. Now, if the US should do that, policymakers and foreign investors and financial institutions across the world will continue to have greater confidence in the American economic system that whenever anybody wants to borrow money from any financial house or institution, definitely we have 1, 2, 3 steps verification as to their declaration of the assets.
All right, lawyer and global affairs analyst Damola Adewale, thank you so much for joining us on the news.
Thank you for having me.